Okay, Eruvin Yud Zayin, we're starting talking about fences that are horizontal or vertical.
אמר רב גידל, אמר רב, שלושה בחמש אסורים, בשבע מותרים. So Rav Gidel says in the name of Rav that if you have three people, you can have such a situation where there are three people that are camped together, and they can have 5 se'ah of area, and they won't be allowed to carry, assuming this bad kind of vertical or horizontal only. And you can have a case where there are 7 se'ah, even bigger area, and it will be allowed. So it's kind of a paradox because it depends on, we'll see. Amru leh, Amar Rav Hachi, they told Rav Gidel, did Rav really say that? Amar lehu, oraita nevi'eh uktiveh Amar Rav Hachi. He said, I swear by Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim, that yes, Rav said that. I mean, it sounds strange because it's a paradox, doesn't make sense. If you're not allowed to carry in a smaller area, then all the more so shouldn't be allowed in a bigger area of 7. But Rav Asher comes and explains it. My kasha, what's your question? Dilma hachika amar hutzrechu leshesh veikifu besheva afilu besheva mutarin lo hutzrechu ela lechamesh veikifu besheva afilu bechamesh asurin. So if they have an encampment, there's 3 people, but they have a lot of things, and they need 6 se'ah worth of area to put all their stuff. And the encampment, the fence, that bad fence with only vertical poles or horizontal is 7. So that's okay because it's only a little bit more. Right? So the idea is that as much as you can use, you can have 2 more se'ah space besides that. So they needed 6, and now they made the encampment of 7. There's only 1 se'ah extra space. That's okay. But if they only need 5, and then they made an encampment of 7, then they can't use any of it, not even the 5 where they put stuff, because there's too much empty space. So the idea is here that if you have nice solid walls, then you can make it very big. But if the walls are kind of just poles, and there's a lot of empty space inside, it doesn't look like an encampment, it doesn't look like anything, and so therefore, that's just considered as if it's open. Okay, good. ובלבד שלא יהיה בית סעתיים פנוי, מה לך פנוי מאדם? So hold on. We said before in the Braita that as long as you don't have 2 sa'atayim, that's empty. Doesn't that mean empty of people? And there's only 3 people here. So what's the difference if it's more or less? Shouldn't you get, a certain amount per person? They say no. Panui mekelim, doesn't matter. I mean, you need 3 people to make it a caravan. But once you have 3 or more people, then the size of it depends on how much stuff you have in there. So you can have 3 people with lots of baggage, and then they can have even a big area. Good. So now we're getting to the second topic for today. Is an eruv static, or does it depend on changing circumstances? But now we're talking about a person who dies or joins. We'll see a case of 2 eruvs that are joints that gets closed up, the joining gets closed up, and we're talking about walls falling down. So let's see each of the cases in turn. So we have 3 people in a caravan. 3 people in a caravan is good. That makes the caravan, and you can use these shaky walls. But he dies. Someone dies on Shabbat, poor guy, and now you only have 2. So at this point, the eruv requires 3, and there's only 2, so now they can only have a small space. Does this change the status on Shabbat? You have to stop carrying? Or do you say, since it was kosher when Shabbat started, then it continues to be kosher now? Or if you have 2, you need to swallow the hand. You had 2 there, and there was not a good eruv, so nobody was carrying. But some guy all of a sudden showed up. Right, that's a happier story. And now, does that change the status of the eruv on Shabbat itself? And now you can start carrying? It's machloket. Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak. Chad amar Shabbat goremet, v'chad amar diurin goremin. One says, we don't know which one is which. One says that Shabbat determines. In other words, on the onset of Shabbat, no, it's static. You take a screenshot right then, and then it stays. And the other said that the number of residents depends. And if more residents come, then that will change. Or if someone dies, then that would also change the status dynamically. Okay, who said which opinion? Kistayem, the Rav Huna hu de amar Shabbat koremet, the amar Rabba be'ai merav Huna u'be'ai merav Yehuda. So it must be that Rav Huna, he's the one that says it's static, right? It's whatever it is on the onset of Shabbat. Because Rabban said he once asked Rav Huna and Rav Yehuda the following question. Erev derech hapetach v'nistam hapetach, derech hachalon v'nistam hachalon, mahu, if I had two private domains that were connected to each other through an opening on the onset of Shabbat. And then during Shabbat, that opening was sealed up for some reason. Can I still continue to transfer something from one to the other? For example, to throw it over the wall, right? So, or if it's sealed up, do I say, now that it's sealed up, they're two separate domains and there's nothing joining them? Or since they were joined at the beginning of Shabbat, it's okay? That was my question. And Rav Huna said, "V'amar li Shabbat ho'il vehutra hutra tistayem." He said, since it was good at the beginning of Shabbat, therefore it's permitted the entire Shabbat. So now we can conclude that Rav Huna is the one that says it depends on the static state at the beginning of Shabbat. Good. Lema Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak beplukta v'Rabbi Yosef v'Rabbi Yehuda kamipalgeh. Perhaps these two Amoraim match up with another machloket between two Tanaim. We're going to try to match it up. Ditnan, חסר שנפרסה משתי רוחותיה, וכן בית שנפרס משתי רוחותיו, וכן מבוי שניצלו קורותיו או לחייו, מותרים לאותה שבת, ואסורים לעתיד לבוא. דברי רבי יהודה. So Mishnah, much later in Masechet Eruvin, says that if there was a courtyard and two of the sides of the walls fell and got a breach in them. Over there it talks about how big that breach is. Or you have a house and two walls, or two pieces of walls on two sides fell down. Or you had a mavoy in which the cross beams or the side posts fell down. Interestingly, it has plural cross beams and side posts, which is strange because you never need more than one cross beam. And we say halacha is like Bet Hillel, that you only need one lechi. So why is it plural here? Rishonim asked this question and wonder if there's a different girsah. I did check, and there is one manuscript that's in the Vatican that has this in singular. So that might be correct. Or I think we could leave it with the plural and just say, in general, any cross beams that are in many courtyards and all side posts. Anyway,
from singular to plural.
Why would it change from singular to plural? It's talking about the cases, all cases. If there are.
I don't know why you could possibly write it in plural. What I'm saying is, if it's in singular, it seems like it fits with the way the Gemara speaks. If it's in plural,
right.
everyone's upset about it. So why would?
Yeah, I agree. Since most of the manuscripts have plural, I would assume that is the original, and that one Vatican manuscript probably changed it to singular to avoid the question that I just asked. Yeah, I agree with you. Good. So we have a machloket Tanaim. The Yehuda says you're allowed to continue carrying in that house or in that courtyard where the walls fell down on that Shabbat. In other words, because at the onset of Shabbat it was kosher, so it still continues to be kosher. That's the words of the Yehuda. See, that would match up with Rav Huna, who also said it's static. Whereas the Yosef says, "Im mutarin le'ota Shabbat, mutarin le'atid labo, v'im asurin le'atid labo, asurin le'ota Shabbat." The Yosef says, no, whatever the status is, this Shabbat is the same as future Shabbatot. Obviously, in future Shabbatot, this is not a kosher eruv. It's missing walls. It's missing a lechi. So therefore, this Shabbat also is no good. Although you were allowed to carry this whole time, and it falls down at midnight, from midnight on, you can't carry. So he is static, and therefore it makes sense that he follows the Rabbi Yitzchak. So Lema Rav Huna damar ke'Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yitzchak damar ke'Rabbi Yosef. This seems to make sense. However, the Talmud says not necessarily, not so fast. Amalach Rav Huna, ana damre afilu l'Rabbi Yosef. Rav Huna could tell you, I might agree with Rabbi Yosef regarding the case of the walls falling down, that it changes status, right? Ad kan lo kama Rabbi Yosef hatam ela dilitnu l'mechisot. Hacha itnu l'mechisot. But a BOC change, it has to change status because the walls aren't there anymore, right? Obviously, there's going to change status. But in our case, where we're talking about the encampment of the caravan and one person dies, the walls are still there. That fence is still present. And so the fence is something that you just can't get around. You can't start walking around like that. But the presence of how many people is less important of a factor. And so you could just take a screenshot at the beginning of Shabbat, and so that part of it can be dynamic. So we give a logic to separate between the two cases. And we can also separate the other way around. He can actually say, like the Yehuda in this case, that it would be static in the case of the walls. Over there, it's the same because the number of people that are there is the same. But in our case of the encampment, the caravan, now there aren't any people. You can't call it a caravan if there aren't 3 people there. And so for him, the number of people is the primary factor, and the walls less so. And so we say it doesn't necessarily match up. Although, I mean, it does look like the opinions, the logic of the opinions definitely do match up, but it's not necessarily so. All right, good. One last point about that Mishnah. It says, Chachamim omerim echad mishne devarim. So I want to show you the Mishnah so it'll be clearer. I'm going to scroll back up here. It was a while ago. Ready? So here it is. The Mishnah mentioned a couple of cases. One, it said that this horizontal or vertical only type of wall, the Yehuda said it can be used only for an encampment, right? Only for a caravan. But you can't use it in the middle of the city. You can't use it permanently. And Chachamim say, no, a caravan is just an example. But really, but you can use it anytime. So in other words, according to Chachamim, you can use this weak type of wall in all cases. And then we have a next machloket that says a mechitza that is only horizontal or only vertical is no good. That's the Yehuda. Chachamim say it could be vertical or horizontal, either one. So what you have here is Chachamim are allowing it, and here Chachamim are allowing it, which seems redundant. Is there any difference between the Chachamim who are arguing with the Yehuda and this Chachamim who are arguing with the Yehuda? And so we answer, now head back. The answer is yes, there is a difference between them, and that is if a single person wants to use it. If a single person wants to use it in a settlement, in other words, not out in a desert, but anywhere, would that be allowed or not? Or is this only something that's a particular leniency that's somewhere out in the desert? According to first Chachamim, who say it doesn't have to be a caravan, it could be anything. So that sounds like it could be anything, but it has to be out in the desert. Even one person can use it. And according to the second one, who are speaking more generally, it sounds like they would permit a single person to use it, even in any place, even in a settled area. Okay, good. Now we get to a very interesting Mishnah, the last of this perek. And when you have a military camp, there's certain leniencies that to make their lives easier and possible. Number one is that you're allowed to get the soldiers are allowed to take wood from any place, and you don't even from private property. We'll see exactly what that means, but they're entitled. Kind of like you have to quarter soldiers. I think that's in our constitution too. So this is part of the Mishnah law that soldiers are allowed to go and take wood wherever they are. They don't have to wash their hands before eating bread. It's very difficult to go and find water. So we're lenient on that. Demai is grain and fruits, vegetables, things that we don't know if the ma'aseh was taken or not. If you bought it from an ama'aret, a simple farmer, most of them do take ma'aseh, but not all of them. So this is questionable, and midrabanan, we're mahmir, but for the soldiers, we permit them to eat it without taking the ma'aseh. And that's why it's relevant to us. They don't have to make an eruv, right? They can carry, it's very difficult to go and make, every time they make an encampment, to go and make an eruv around it, they're allowed to carry without an eruv. Very interesting exemption. Okay, now we're going to go through each one. So first of all, it says that this is even for an optional war, right? You might think that's only for an optional war means one of expansion, or it's not a necessary or a defensive war, or for the main land of Israel. Okay, so, and it also has, you're allowed begezel, you're allowed to actually steal it. So in other words, even firewood that was prepared as firewood, they're allowed to take. Okay, it's basically part of the condition, we'll see, of settling in the land. They're also allowed to camp anywhere they want. They just go to, someone's backyard or a park or whatever. That's their right. That's part of the, it's part of the laws of being a citizen there. You have to allow them quarter. And if someone dies, a soldier dies, then he can be buried. He has a right to be buried right there wherever he dies, even if it's someone's land or someone's field. He goes there. Okay, that's a tosefta. Let's analyze it. Mutarin begezel etzim yeveshim hai takanta diyoshua hava. The malmor asaratin itna Yoshua shehum mad'in bechorashin umelaketin asim misedotehen. So the question is, why does the Tosefta have to tell us, and the Mishnah have to tell us a special law that soldiers are allowed to take wood? We have a statement that when Yoshua entered the land, or the people entered the land with Yoshua, he made 10 enactments. It doesn't list all 10 here, but these are conditions of entering the land. And one of them is that you're allowed to graze your animals in woods belonging to others, and you can gather wood from other people's fields. Not only soldiers, but anyone. The point is, if it's an area that they don't really use, and so you can go and graze there. We share our space and our things in that way. So since everyone is allowed to go and take wood, why do you have to tell me that soldiers in particular are allowed to take wood? That's the question. The answer, a number of 3 possibilities. When Yeshua said that anyone's allowed to go and take wood, that's talking about shrubs and thorns. We have pictures here of these types of things that aren't usually used. So the owner doesn't lay claim to them, and so he doesn't mind if people go and take them. Whereas soldiers can actually take any kind of wood, no matter what it is, even good wood that the owner would want to use. Or another possibility, Yoshua only said that you can take things that are attached to the ground. So you can go and pull them up and go and you have to dry them out and all that. But the soldiers can even take things that were already detached by the owner. Or you could say that when Yeshua said anyone's allowed to take wood, that's talking about wood that is still moist and not really usable. But soldiers can even take the dried out wood that people prepared, and so that is a much bigger leniency for soldiers. Okay, good. The Birta ben Tema omer, Af chonin b'chol makom ubamakom sheneheragin sham nikbarin. So the continuation of Tosefta says they can also encamp in any place they want, and the place where they die, they have a right to be buried there. Pishita, met mitzvah hu, or met mitzvah koneh mekomo. A similar type of question. Well, this is not a special law regarding a soldier. Any met mitzvah, anyone who is a corpse that is found, and there's no family there, there's nobody claiming it, nobody taking care of it. So there's a mitzvah, great mitzvah to bury it, and he can be buried right at the spot, wherever it is. Now, if it happens to be in your backyard, then you have to give over a spot in your backyard for the person to be buried. So this is true for anyone, any met mitzvah. Why are you telling me specifically for a soldier? That's the question. V'asiricha af al gav de'it le kobrin detanya. Ezehu met mitzvah kol she'en lo kobrin. Kore v'acharim onin oto and ze met mitzvah. Oh, the difference is if it's someone, right, who has people to bury him as a braita. What is the definition of a met mitzvah? Anyone who has no one to bury him. But if that person on his deathbed, let's say, right, makes a call and say, oh, it's my deathbed, and can you bury me? If that person would call out, and there would be friends, family who could come and help him out, then that is not called a met mitzvah. So therefore, you see that the definition of met mitzvah is more limited. However, a soldier can be buried on the spot no matter what, even if he does have people who would come and bury him and could take care of him and could bring him to another place, to a cemetery. If they want to, he can be buried there on the spot. Okay. So again, the soldier has a greater leniency. Met mitzvah kana mekomo. Does the met mitzvah, is that true that a met mitzvah can be buried right there wherever he is? Right? What if he's in the middle of a road? Sratya, again, the Greek word that's the root of our word street, right? It's the middle of the street, so this is not good. You don't want to bury him there. First of all, it's not very dignified, and besides, it's a problem. Kohanim won't be able to walk down that street anymore. So mefanehu limin isratya or the small isratya. So what you can do is you can move him to the right or to the left side shoulder of the street. If you have an uncultivated field and a plowed field, so you should move it you should move it to the uncultivated field. In other words, don't impose on whoever owns that field more than necessary. One that was plowed and one that was sown, in other words, it's developed even more and therefore worth more. So you take it to the one that's only plowed and not the one that's sowed, so that you can minimize the loss for the owner. If the fields on each side are equal, then you can choose whichever one you want. Okay. The point of here, this is that he doesn't acquire wherever he is. That he's moved. He's not buried in the middle of the street, right? So this is a contradiction. Okay, this is talking about, this whole baraita is talking about someone that dies in the middle of a public path. And so that's why he can't put him there, right? This would be a problem for Kohanim, and it's not dignified. People are going to be walking on top. So therefore, once you're allowed to move him, then you say, oh, I move him to this side or that side, move him to an uncultivated field. That's when these laws kick in. But this does not contradict the basic law that if a person dies not on a street, but in the middle of a field, a park, whatever it is, then he can be buried right on the spot. Okay. Obviously, today we would, bring that person to a proper cemetery, and that would be more dignified, and with all kinds of problems if you just bury someone in the middle of the side of a highway or anything like that. Okay. Okay, so the soldier does not have to go and find water to wash his hands. This only applies to the tilat yadayim before the meal, but it does not apply to the mayim hacharonim that we have after the meal before Birkat Hamazon. That is chova, and so therefore they still have to go and find some water for that. What is the purpose of washing after the meal? Because there is the salt from sedum that is very strong, and it can blind a person. And so since people would eat with their hands, and then they might rub their eye and go blind, so this is really this halakha is based on safety and good health. Okay, this melach sedomit here in the Steindelt identifies it as magnesium chloride. which is found in great quantities at the Dead Sea and can be mixed up into salt and is in fact quite poisonous and could be problematic. So if you did have this, it would be a good idea to wash your hands. There's a famous Tosafot here on this page that says, nowadays we don't have any melach sodomit and we don't stick our fingers in it either. And so therefore, you do not have to do ma'im acharonim. However, that really only represents the Tosafot's approach. Rambam and Sfaradim in general say that one still needs to do the halacha is not dependent on the reason or this reason, and therefore one still has to do ma'im acharonim.
It makes
okay.
No, it seems like this melach sodomit is an explanation of an existing law. Like why do we do this anyway? And coming up with the reason.
Yeah, I mean they are separated into two different statements. But does say chova means chova, and then the explanation is said by someone else. Would Abaye agree with that? And that depends. I mean, that's one question is, was it dependent on the reason? Another question is, even if halacha was made for a given reason, does the halacha just drop out if the reason changes? There are a few places where Tosafot says, yes, it does change. Kind of like instruments on Shabbat. He says, we don't know how to fix instruments, therefore you're allowed to clap and things like that. If you're interested, Chacham Faoud has an important article on this methodology of Balei Tosafot, and he says that this is not the way of the legal thinking of Harambam and the Sephardi approach.
No, if we continue also, the Abaye continues talking about melach sodomit. So, but it sounds like it's an old, like Pitka, my maharim chova, and like, oh, why is it a chova? All right, anyway.
Right. Okay. But anyway, this is a good statement to remember because anytime you eat, you should always say a Devar Torah. And so if you can't think of a Devar Torah, you can always just say ma'im acharonim, chova, and you got a nice 3-word Devar Torah. Okay. You're making a good point here that Abaye does continue with the explanation. Amar Abaye umishtakecha kekorta bechora. You confound it, just one grain in a whole cord, which is a huge amount. I wonder if korta is the root of our word carrot. We say like a diamond, number of carrots. It means a grain. Okay. Amar le Rav Acha bered Ravad Rav Asher kayil milcha mai. Amar le ha la me ba'ya. The question is, what if someone's measuring salt? He's not eating, but all day long he's measuring salt, he's touching salt. Does he also have to do ma'im acharonim? Is it a law in touching salt or a law in eating? And he said the answer is, of course that person would also have to. So it's actually really more about the touching of the salt than the meal. So it's actually more expansive than just a meal. Okay, umedemai. Right, the folk etymology is da mai. This, what is it? Right, this is a vegetation that we don't know if Ma'aseh was taken, but a soldier is allowed to eat it. Ditnan. There's other leniencies that if a poor person comes, you're allowed to give them demai. A poor person can eat demai. They don't have to be so particular. Probably the Ma'aseh was taken from it. Also, achsanya, which means a guest, and it can mean in particular a guest soldier. So can eat it. So that would support what our Mishnah as well. Amar Abunas Tana Bet Shammai Omerim En Machlin Taniyim Demai Bet Achsanya Demai. Bet Hillel Omerim Machlin Taniyim Demai Bet Achsanya Demai. Okay, although we quoted the Mishnah as some, but in fact it is we learned in the Baraita that's subject to Machloket. Bet Shammai is Machmir on this. So you have to take Ma'aseh for sure first, and only then can a poor person and soldier eat it. Bet Hillel, however, is the opinion of the Mishnah that is allowed. Okay, and here's the one that's relevant to our Masechet, that the soldiers do not have to make an eruv if they want to carry. Amri diber Rav Yanai, lo shanu ela eruvei haserot, aval eruvei techomin hayavin. Eruv haserot is midrabanan. In other words, technically they have an encampment. Midoraita, they're allowed to carry. The rabbis say in general, don't carry unless you have an eruv. But the same rabbis that said you can't carry unless you have an eruv, they can make an exemption and say for soldiers, they're camping out, very difficult, they're constantly moving, they can't take time out to go and make an eruv every place. So they don't need one. However, that's only for Eruv Haserot, for carrying inside the camp. But Eruv Techumin is much more strict, according to some opinions, it's Deoraita, as the Pasuk says, Al Yeseh Ish Mimikomo Bayom HaShevi'i. That means you can't go outside the city or the camp 2,000 amot or more. You're not allowed to just even walk there, right? You certainly can't carry outside the fence, but you can't even walk. You can't travel more than 2,000 amot. That still is in place for the soldiers. Right? Because it says that if one violates and does walk outside 2,000 amot, that person gets lashes, and it's called Devar Torah. So you see that it is a Torah law. This reminds me of another very, very interesting law that we read in the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, who did not, as far as we can tell, have eruv for carrying, but they did have a problem of Tehum Shabbat. They said one is not allowed to carry outside of an encampment more than 1,000 amot. We have 2,000 amot, but they have 1,000 amot, which is a problem for the Dead Sea sect, because they also say that if a person has to relieve himself, number two, he has to go outside of the encampment 2,000 amot in order to keep it clean. So you see on Shabbat, this could be a very big problem for them, because they have to go out 2,000 amot, but they're not allowed to go out more than 1,000 amot, which means they are not allowed to go to the bathroom on Shabbat. I don't know how they resolved that problem. Maybe they had a special David Blaine diet or something. Okay, but the rabbis do agree that Techum Shabbat does apply, and Eruv Techumin, which means if you want to go beyond the 2,000 limit, you can go and put a meal 2,000 amot away, and then you can go in that direction even 4,000 amot. All that does apply to soldiers. Matkifla Rabbi Yonatan Bechilokin Alav Shebe'al. Hold on, this law is not stated with law, like law tirsat, and but it says Al Yeseh Ish Mekomo. Do not leave your place. And so, do you get lashes on something that on a law that is based on the word al rather than the word law? So you shouldn't get lashes. This question is on the Bichiyah here. Matkif Rav Acha Bar Yaakov Ela Me'ata Tichtiv Al Tifnu El Ha'obot Ve'el Hayideonim Achanameh Dela Lakeh. Well, a second. Here's another pasuk that says the word al. Don't go and turn to ghosts and necromancers, magicians, and this is said with al. Would you say here also you don't get lashes, but you do get lashes? So this is not a true principle. It's perfectly okay. You get lashes even if it says al. So we changed the question. We reinterpreted. This was his question. Lav shenitan la'azarat mitat betin. In general, there's a principle that something that is going to be punishable in the Torah, Torah needs to say it twice. Once as a warning, and another pasuk as the actual punishment. And so any law that has subject to warning, right, and mitat betin, and is capital punishment, if you do it in a way where you don't get capital punishment, like if there's no witnesses or whatever, then you also do not get lashes, right? And so this would seem to be included in that. Why? Because this is, although we're reading al yestesh mimikomo, which is actually what the pasuk says, we're reading as if it also reads al yotzi ish mimikomo. You cannot carry outside. That these two laws are somehow related. Right, walking outside too far and carrying on Shabbat anywhere that there's in the Shut Harabim. And so, since carrying does carry a punishment, a capital punishment, and so this is something that is within the area of capital punishment, which would require a warning. So, therefore, if you do it in a way that doesn't get capital punishment, in this case, walking outside 2,000 amot, which doesn't get capital punishment, you should also not get lashes. That's the question. And Rav Asher answers, Amar Rav Asher, Miketiv al yosi, al yeseh ketiv. These are two separate things. Don't confuse al yosi with al yeseh. This pasuk just says al yeseh shmekomo. the context of the pasuk is don't go out and go and carry and get man and bring it back in. All right, but the point is we generalize it and say one is not allowed to leave this place at all, and so that's one law, and that law stands on its own. And if one violates that, one would get lashes. And it's a different law altogether of carrying outside, carrying on Shabbat is not derived from this pasuk, and so therefore that would require lashes. Hazlan alach mavoy chazakim ubruchim. We're finishing a challenging pedek, but I think one that gave us all the basic principles that will serve us well as we continue the next pedek tomorrow. Thank you, everybody, for joining.